And please keep it going for Terry, everybody.
Hi. I have a 87-year-old mother, and she is not in great health. She has spinal stenosis, which is like a narrowing of the spinal cord, so walking is really painful. She has macular degeneration, so she really can't see very well, and she also has significant hearing loss, so she's deaf. And even given all of these challenges, she is prickly as hell. Right? She's just really prickly, and she could be really difficult, and she was a feminist her whole life, and she's always fighting battles, and she's not an easy person. So a couple of weeks ago, I take her for an outpatient surgery procedure at this hospital in Fort Washington to on her spine to release some of the pressure so that walking won't be so painful. And I'm happy to do it, but I know it's going to be very challenging because she has a lot of anxiety about this. And when she has anxiety, like a lot of people, they project that anxiety outward. And by that means she could be screaming at people and ranting and raving. And like I said, she's not easy. But, I'm the youngest of 5, so I'm willing to do this. And so I take her to the outpatient. Oh, and also I should tell you, she's a physician. And so, she feels like she knows everything, and she's smarter than everyone, and everyone's an idiot, and the whole thing, including me. So I take her to the outpatient surgery center in Fort Washington, and I'm basically her ears and her eyes. Like I'm also her power of attorney, so I have to sign her in, and I'm writing her name for everything. I'm doing everything for her. And then they say, okay, she's ready. So we go to the prep area, and then I wasn't going to tell this part of the story, but I have to help her get into the hospital gown, and that's also, it's definitely a whole role reversal thing that I'm helping my 87-year-old mother undress and get in, and this part is just not really part of the guilty pleasure story, but it's so great where the nurse says, hands her a gown and says, you have to take off everything, but you could leave your bras and underwear on, and she's like, well, I don't wear a bra. So she goes, well, then you have to take it off. She goes, but I have a shirt. I wear like the undershirt as a bra. I'm not comfortable with a bra anymore. I wear this shirt. She's like, well, then you have to take off the shirt. She goes, well, the shirt's my bra. And I'm like, you're getting surgery on your back. Take off the shirt. Like, do you want the surgery or not? So I'm trying to be very casual. So we take off the shirt. I put on the gown. And there is a part of me that I'm like, in that moment, I remember, it's like I'm dressing my daughter. And it's very odd because it's my mother's, naked body that I'm putting the gown on. And she says, I used to be a 34B, now I'm a 36 long. Which I'm pretty sure is like an old Joan Rivers joke, but I don't question her about it. So I'm like, okay, that's great. So she's in the gown and she's in the bed and she's waiting, and I can tell she's a little anxious. And the anesthesiologist comes over, and he starts talking to her, and he has a very thick accent. And she can't understand him, and I can barely understand him. And I can tell she's getting agitated because she's a physician, she wants to know everything, she can't understand him. And I can tell she's getting really anxious, and it's going south. And meanwhile, I'm getting a little annoyed because it says in the chart, patient is hard of hearing. And so I don't want to be like, someone who, I'm careful, in this day and age, not to be like, oh, we hate foreigners, like, what's with the accent? So instead I said, doctor, you have a very sexy accent, but we're having a little difficulty understanding you. Would you mind speaking a little slower? And my mother, because I want to be like, we love people, but, she's I don't know what she feels these days. So she says, yes, I noticed your accent. Like, how could you not? But she's deaf. So she goes, where are you from? And he says, I am from Belarus. And she's like, never heard of it. And I said, Mom, that's in Eastern Europe. And he looks at me and goes, yes. And I will tell you, this is a really good-looking man. Like a really good-looking man. He's like Mikhail Baryshnikov, but taller, and he's got these huge shoulders and blonde hair and blue eyes, and he looks at me like, yes. And in that moment, I'm like, yeah. I know what I'm doing. And so she says, she goes, where is that? And I said, Mom, it's Eastern Europe. She goes, I never heard of it. And I said, Mom, it's one of the countries that broke up in the former Soviet Union. And he goes, yes, that's right. and I'm thinking, like, is he impressed with me? Like I'm some kind of like world scholar? And I know it's ridiculous, but in my life, I don't get to impress many men like that. I always think the biggest compliment for me personally is when people think I'm smart. Like I'm a real, like, oh, you're so smart, like a teacher's pet a little bit. So I can tell I'm like thinking, yeah, I'm smart. Like I know world history. And so, but what's so interesting in that moment, I said, Mom, he's Russian. And my mother is Russian. And she's like, I'm Russian too. So she's like, my father came to this country and his name was Nasim Lazanovsky. And so then they start talking about it. And he goes, I'm from Minsk. And she goes, oh, well, if you had said Minsk, I would have known exactly where you're from. And, my mother was from the Ukraine. And it was so interesting because, she was cranky and she was anxious and she was upset. But in that moment, that one, this guy was 40, maybe, my mother's 87. But in that one moment, that little connection, it just sort of relieved all of her anxiety. And he took really good care of her. And I felt like personally, I had a high that whole day that I knew my world history. So thank you.
Terry, everybody.